Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. And if you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to share some stats of my reading in the first half of 2023. And I'm also going to share my top 10 fiction books so far this year. I will also be posting my top books of 2023, the nonfiction edition, in the next day or two. So if you're interested in nonfiction, then definitely stay tuned for that as well. So let's get into this. Taking a look back from January to the end of June, I've had a pretty good reading year. I'm going to share my stats first. So as of the end of June 2023, I've read a total of 68 books, which was 21,206 pages. And that's pretty good. You can see how the numbers have dropped in the last couple of months, but I'm further along in my goal of reading 100 books this year, so still on track that way. More importantly is quality over quantity, and my average star rating is 4.03, so I'm pretty happy with that as well. And if we look at the types of books that I read, the top moods are emotional, reflective, dark, sad, mysterious, challenging, funny, informative, tense, then hopeful, lighthearted, adventurous, and inspiring. None of this is really surprising to me. I do like more emotional, sad, intense books, so this makes sense. For pace, the majority of my books fall into medium pace at 67%. Followed by slow at 21%, and then fast at 12%. And again, this makes sense to me too. There's nothing really earth-shattering about any of this. Next is page number, and 51% of my books were between 300 to 499 pages. And that's only 35 books. I was a little surprised that this number wasn't higher, and I was surprised at how high the percentage was for books at less than 300 pages, which was 44%. That's 30 of the books that I've read. Then, not surprising, was that only 4% of the books I read were over 500 pages. And that seems pretty accurate since I think I've only read 3, maybe 4 books so far this year that are over 500 pages. 75% of the books I've read have been fiction, 25% nonfiction. I'm actually quite happy with that nonfiction amount, especially because I don't think that it's usually or that it's always that high. It will be interesting to see if this is maintained by the end of the year or if the number will go down or even go up. That's a possibility. Then the last stat that I will share are the genres, at least according to Storygraph. My top 5 genres are literary. That's no surprise. Historical and contemporary, which also makes sense to me. This is followed by memoir and classics. And it's true, I have read quite a few memoirs so far this year. And classics, I think, is this high because of the Tuesdays with Toni reading project that I'm doing with AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. I think most, maybe even all, of Toni Morrison's books are considered classics, and I think that's why my reading stats look like that. So those are my stats so far this year. Now let's take a look at my top 10 fiction books of the year so far. 51 of the 68 books I read were fiction, and I am going to do a countdown to my number 1 fiction book of the year so far, knowing that on another day, maybe even in another hour, these might be in a different order. I rated all of these books 5 stars. I had to leave a couple of 5 stars behind to narrow it down to just the top 10, which is always difficult to pick and choose. But these are all books that I really, really enjoyed. And my first 2 books are both romances, but they are very different than each other. So at number 10 is Life's Too Short by Abby Jiminez. This is the 3rd book in the Friend Zone series. And normally series for me like start fizzling out after the first book. So the fact that this is a 5-star read and the third book is very rare. This could actually be read as a standalone novel, but if you do read the other books first, then some of the characters do make an appearance. They reappear in this story. This is a friends to lovers story, and the characters are fun. Vanessa and Adrian are the main characters in this one, and they are neighbors and are quite different than one another. They seem like opposites in a lot of ways, and when Vanessa needs help babysitting a child that's not even her child, Adrian is there to help. And there is more to the characters and story than just the love story. And the book is funny. Like, it made me laugh out loud from the very beginning, and that always gets my attention. So if you are looking for, a good rom-com feel-good story, this might work for you. At number 9 is another romance on the list, and it is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This was a recommendation from Leo Bancroft, and basically the story is about two writers, Ava and Shane. Shane is quite famous, but more of a homebody and isn't into the spotlight. Ava is starting to be known and is doing a literary event when Shane shows up at the event. The two have a history that no one, at least publicly, knows about, and they reconnect, and then over 7 days in June, they see if they have a second chance together. I really enjoyed their story, but my favorite character was actually Ava's daughter, who was just so real to me. This book, like Life's Too Short, it made me laugh out loud as well, even though it also deals with heavier topics. So this is another good one to pick up if you like romance or a second chance trope. At number 8, I have a debut novel, When We Were Vikings by Andrew David MacDonald, Canadian author. The main character is 21-year-old Zelda. She's quirky, and I love her. She likes rules and schedules, and she loves anything that has to do with Vikings. She lives with her brother Gert, and Zelda faces life as a Viking, as a warrior, especially when she finds out that women can be warriors and powerful too. Zelda's goal is to be legendary. She wants to be independent, and when Zelda finds herself and those that she loves in danger, she faces it with courage and just has a lot to teach those around her. I thought this was such a heartwarming story. Coming in at number 7 is another debut novel, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This was the first book of the reading project I'm doing with AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. And it was the first book that I've read by Toni Morrison. The story begins with two sisters whose parents take in boarders. One of the boarders is a young girl named Picoult, who is the protagonist of the story. And Picoult believes that she is ugly and dreams of being white. She prays for blue eyes and believes that would make her beautiful and all of her troubles would disappear. They would fade away. There is so much to this story. There are a lot of layers to it, which I think is why you could actually get more out of it every time you read it if you're a rereader. My favorite thing about the book was the writing. It's beautifully written and uses a lot of symbolism. It's a very powerful story, and I think this is one of the best debuts that I've ever read. At number 6, I have another Toni Morrison novel, and that is Sula, which was Toni Morrison's second novel, but I liked it a bit more than her debut. Again, for me, it was because of the writing. I felt like every word, every sentence, every paragraph had a reason for being. This story takes place in a fictional town in Ohio, and it's filled with interesting characters. Sula is the third generation of an interesting line of women, and she becomes friends with Nell. Sula and Nell have very different lives, and their personalities are different too, and their lives take different paths. Sula leaves, and 10 years later, when she returns to the town people believe that she must be evil because of things that are happening. So there's this whole idea of good and evil that's huge in the story, and they are contrasted with things being black and white. And it really makes you wonder what happens when things aren't so clear, especially with Nell and Sula, because they begin to see that maybe they aren't as different as each other as they originally thought. So this was just an intense read with a lot of moments that made me close the book for a minute to kind of digest what had happened. So at this point, we are halfway through our reading project, AJ and I, and this is my favorite Toni Morrison novel so far. Now we are looking at the top 5 books of 2023. These next 2 books are pretty much interchangeable, and I believe that I have found a new favorite author after reading these 2. So at number 5 is Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I read this when I was judging the BookTube prize. This book, it has everything I love. Quirky characters with a unique storyline. It was funny and incredibly clever. It takes place over a summer in Tennessee when 2 teenagers who are kind of loners, they become friends, Frankie and Zeke, and they decide to make a poster, and they put it up all over the town. And it really captures the attention of the entire community. People become obsessed with who put these posters up and what do they mean, what is it all about. Meanwhile, these 2 teenagers are pretty harmless, but the summer affects their entire lives. And a couple of decades later, the story of the posters resurfaces, and Frankie and Zeke have to face their past. I adored this story, and it made me want to read more of Kevin Wilson's books, which is always a really good sign. This leads me to number 4, which is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Now, I really enjoyed Now Is Not the Time to Panic, but I think I enjoyed this one even more because it is about twins who spontaneously combust, and I thought it was so well written. Lillian is the main character, and an old high school friend asks her for help with her children. And for some reason, Lillian becomes connected to these 2 children in a way that no one else seems to be able to do. She understands them. And I thought that the character development of Lillian in particular was excellent, and the dynamics between all of the characters was also very well done. This book also made me laugh out loud. That just seems to be a recurring theme for me with this list. I have said before that Kevin Wilson is writing stories that I don't even know I need to read until I read them. So I still want to read more by him, and we'll hope to do that even this year. For the final 3 books, we kind of move from, books that made me laugh to more serious books that make me think or feel deeply. And at number 3 is another Canadian author, and it is Greenwood by Michael Christie. I read this for the Reading Across Canada challenge that I'm doing. It was also shortlisted for Canada Reads this year. The story begins in 2038 with Jake, who is a botanist and forest guide for the pilgrims and celebrities, basically, who have come to see some of the last trees in existence. Because basically there's been this environmental disaster called the withering. And every time I talk about this book, I end up talking about the structure of it because in many ways that is what makes this book unique and interesting. So we follow the Greenwood family tree, going back in time, following the tree rings, and we go back to 2008, where we meet Jake's father, Liam Greenwood. Then we meet Liam's mother, Willow, in 1974. In 1934, we meet Everett Greenwood, who is my favorite character. Then we go back to 1908, where we learn how this tree took root with two boys, Everett and Harris, and their connection to these trees happened really early on. And then once we have an understanding of the beginning of the family, we then move forward again to 2038. And I've said this before too, that this is a book that you don't just read, it's a book that you experience. And this has also made me want to read more by Michael Christie. So again, that's a really good sign. Number 2 is My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. This is a book that I loved and that I continue to think about. This is a story of a family with a sick child named Kate who has leukemia. And at one point, the chances of her finding a bone marrow match are so small that her parents decide to have another child using a pre-implantation genetic diagnosis so that this child can be a match for Kate. And they have Anna. And Anna's life revolves around Kate's life of hospital stays and illness. And eventually, Anna seeks out a lawyer to get medical emancipation so that she can make her own decisions. And I just thought that this story was brilliantly told. It's told in alternating perspectives of the family members and Anna's lawyer. And this book covers a lot, like the dynamics of the family, ethical tensions, and it also made me feel everything from empathy to anger. And it's a story that makes you think, and I'm sure that this is one that will stay with me for a very long time. Finally, at number 1 is the book that has made me feel the most this year, and that is A Little Life by Hanya Yanigahara. I was very happy to buddy read this with Sonia, who is a friend and subscriber. I probably don't have to say too much about this book because I know it's been everywhere, but this is another book that will stay with me for a very long time. This story follows 4 friends, Willem, Malcolm, JB, and Jude, over several decades. Jude is the protagonist, and we know from the very beginning that Jude has medical concerns, and we also know that his 3 friends help him, even though they also don't really know the extent of Jude's condition or his story. And this story is about friendship and having a good support system, found family kind of thing. And as we learn about the strong bonds that the 4 characters have, we also get glimpses into Jude's past from his childhood and the many traumas that he experienced growing up. It's a difficult and painful story that is a slow burn, and it's beautifully written. This book covers mental illness, the effects of abuse, and coping with unimaginable things in a way that I haven't read like this before. The book is over 800 pages. It's massive, so it's definitely a commitment, but I do believe that every word is worth a read. But you do need to prepare your heart for this one because it is intense. So these are my top 10 fiction books of 2023 so far. Please let me know if you have read any of these or if you are interested in reading any of them. Also, let me know what fiction books made it into, say, your top 10 this year as well. As I mentioned earlier, I will also be doing a nonfiction countdown edition, which I will post in the next day or 2, so please stay tuned for that. And I will link all of the playlists and the booktubers that I mentioned in the comment or in the description box below. So be sure to check that out. As always, I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.